Imagine the new oil isn't buried underground. It's humming inside a data center, and everyone wants a piece of it. But here's the twist. The choke point isn't a pipeline or a tanker ship. It's a chip. And the rules around it? Today, we're diving into one of the biggest tech battles of our time. The US, China, and a company called Nvidia. You've probably heard Nvidia mentioned in the news lately. Stock prices going crazy, AI chips, export bans, all that stuff. But here's what most people don't realize. This isn't just about selling computer parts, this is about controlling the future. So let me break it down for you. By the end, you'll understand why a tiny chip is causing massive geopolitical headaches. Ready? Let's go. First question, what is the US actually trying to block here? Spoiler, it's not just chips. Okay, so here's the deal. The US has been tightening export controls on AI chips to China for years now. Started around 2022, got stricter in 2023, and by 2024, many analysts were calling it a kind of technology Cold War. But here's what you need to understand. The US isn't trying to stop China from buying a few graphics cards. They're trying to slow down China's ability to train massive AI models. Think ChatGPT level stuff, but on a national scale. See, training AI isn't like running a program on your laptop. It requires thousands of chips working together in clusters. Picture this. One chip is like one worker. A cluster? That's an entire factory with thousands of workers, all synchronized. The US strategy is basically this. Don't let China build those factories. Limit the chips, limit the training capability, and it's not just about raw power anymore. The rules target bandwidth, memory, even how chips can communicate with each other. Make sense so far? Good. But here's where it gets interesting. If you block someone, they start finding workarounds. And that leads us to a big question. By blocking China, is the US actually pushing them to become self-sufficient faster? So here's where things get spicy. Recently, the Trump administration signaled they might loosen some of these restrictions. Reports came out saying Nvidia's H200 chips might be sold to China again. Sounds like good news for China, right? Well, hold on. Because the devil is in the details. And these details, they're wild. Let me explain what's actually happening. First, there's talk of a US cut, described as a license fee or revenue share, with numbers floated around 15% to 25%. Think about that for a second. It's like saying, sure, you can buy this, but we're taxing you for the privilege. Second, some reports said Nvidia wanted full upfront payment to reduce policy risk. Though Nvidia later pushed back on that framing, why such harsh terms get discussed at all? Because rules can change overnight and approvals can be unpredictable. It's a gamble either way. So even if sales are allowed, the conditions can be so strict that it becomes a new form of control. Clever, huh? But wait, there's another side to this story. China isn't just sitting around waiting for permission. They're making their own moves. Here's the plot twist. Reports said China issued guidance that state-funded data center projects should use domestic chips first. That can mean no Nvidia, no AMD, no foreign chips, at least inside certain state-backed projects. That's a big deal. So we've got this weird situation. The US is sort of opening the door while China is sort of closing it. And here's where it gets really fascinating. Some Chinese companies are going offshore to train their AI models abroad. They're basically saying, fine, we can't buy chips at home. We'll rent computing power somewhere else. The irony is thick. This brings up a crucial question. If everyone's trying to de-Nvidia, why hasn't anyone actually succeeded yet? Great question. All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Why is everyone so dependent on Nvidia? It seems almost ridiculous, right? Like, there are other chip companies. AMD exists. Intel exists. China has Huawei. So, what's the big deal? Here's the thing most people don't get. The dependency isn't really on the chip itself. It's on something called CUDA. CUDA is Nvidia's software platform. Think of it like this. The GPU is the engine, but CUDA is the entire highway system. It includes the roads, the gas stations, the repair shops, the traffic lights, everything you need to actually drive somewhere. Now imagine trying to use a different engine on roads that weren't built for it. Sure, it might work, but smoothly? Probably not. And here's the kicker. A huge share of major AI breakthroughs in the last decade were built on CUDA. The libraries, the frameworks, the optimization tricks, they all assume you're running on NVIDIA hardware with CUDA underneath. Let me give you a concrete example. There's QDNN for deep learning primitives, and QBLAS for the heavy-duty matrix math. Nvidia has spent years optimizing these libraries to squeeze every ounce of performance out of their chips. It's incredibly fine-tuned. If you switch to a different chip, you lose a lot of that optimization. Your code might still run, but often meaningfully slower. In AI, that slowdown isn't just annoying. It means higher costs, longer training times, and sometimes losing the competitive race. But wait, there's more. When you're training really big models like GPT level, you need thousands of GPUs talking to each other. That communication between GPUs, NVIDIA has a special library called NCCL that handles it, and it's optimized for their hardware. So it's not just, can I run the code? It's, can I run it at the same speed, same cost, same reliability? And honestly, for most companies, the answer is no. Switching is just too risky and too expensive. Does that make sense? Think about it from a business perspective. You're a tech company. Your AI model launch is scheduled for next quarter. Are you really going to risk everything by switching to an unproven chip platform? Most executives would say absolutely not. And there's one more thing. The knowledge base. All the troubleshooting guides, tutorials, and expertise, they're built around NVIDIA. So even finding engineers who know how to optimize for non-NVIDIA chips is harder. It's a whole ecosystem, not just hardware. All right, so here's where we stand. CUDA isn't just software. It's essentially become the operating system for AI computing. And that brings us to the million-dollar question. If breaking free from NVIDIA is so hard, what can China realistically do? So let's talk about China's playbook. They're not dumb. They know the CUDA trap, and they've been working on alternatives. Huawei, for example, has been developing something called the Ascend chip series. They're positioning it as China's NVIDIA killer. The Ascend 9 and 10 series has gone through multiple versions, 910B, 910C, each trying to close the gap with NVIDIA's offerings. And they've got roadmaps for 950, 960, even 970. So the ambition is definitely there. But ambition and reality are different things. Here's the honest truth. Even if Chinese chips match NVIDIA on paper specs, they face two brutal bottlenecks: supply and software. On the supply side, one widely cited estimate, attributed to US officials, put Huawei's 2025 high-end AI chip output around 200,000 units. Compare that to global demand for millions of chips. The math just doesn't work out for a complete domestic replacement. And on the software side, remember the whole CUDA ecosystem we talked about? China has to build their own version from scratch. That takes years, not because the engineers aren't talented, but because ecosystems are built on millions of hours of optimization. So what's China actually doing? Smart move. They're not trying to replace everything at once. They're playing a two-track game. Track 1. Push domestic chips hard in government and state-funded projects. It's easier to mandate when you control the budget. Track 2. For private companies and cutting-edge training, allow a mix. Domestic chips plus whatever NVIDIA they can get. There's also a third option that's pretty clever. Some Chinese companies are training their AI models overseas to access better chips. Think about the irony. Export controls are supposed to keep advanced computing in the US, but computing can be rented remotely. It's like saying, you can't buy this car, but then the person just uses Uber instead. The restriction creates workarounds. And here's another angle. China is focusing heavily on inference chips first, not training chips. Why? It's strategically smart. Training requires the absolute best hardware. But inference, running AI models after they're trained, is more forgiving on chip requirements. So China's bet is, we'll catch up on inference first, keep buying NVIDIA for training, and slowly close the gap. It's not a heroic, we'll beat them tomorrow story. It's more like a marathon strategy. Practical, but slower than headlines suggest. So where does that leave us? Let's zoom out and ask the big question everyone wants answered. Can China actually pull this off? All right, final chapter. The question everyone's asking, can China actually reduce its dependence on US AI chips? Short answer, it depends. I know, that sounds like a cop-out. But hear me out. The answer actually changes depending on what dependence means. Let's break it into 3 time horizons: short-term, medium-term, and long-term. Each one looks very different for China's prospects. Short-term, meaning the next 1 to 2 years? Honestly, limited progress. They can reduce dependence for inference and government projects. But for frontier model training, the really big stuff, Nvidia will still be king. The software gap alone takes years to close. Medium term, 3 to 5 years? This is where things could shift. If China builds its own software ecosystem, dynamics change. But here's the catch. It's not just about technology, it's about convincing developers to actually use the new ecosystem. Remember, CUDA's power comes from network effects. Everyone uses it because everyone else uses it. Breaking that cycle is incredibly hard. Long term, beyond 5 years, complete independence from Nvidia is probably not the goal. And honestly, it doesn't need to be. The realistic endgame looks more like this: diversified dependence. China uses domestic chips where possible, imports where necessary. They maintain workarounds, offshore training, cloud computing deals, gray market channels, to keep their AI ambitions moving forward. It's not a clean China wins or US wins story. It's messier than that, more like a long, grinding competition with no clear ending. And here's the part that affects everyone, including you and me. This competition will shape how AI develops for the entire world. If the world splits into two AI ecosystems, one American, one Chinese, then innovation could fragment. Standards might diverge completely. Think about it like this. Remember VHS versus Betamax? Or Blu-ray versus HD DVD? Now imagine that, but for the future of intelligence, countries around the world will have to choose sides. Which chip ecosystem do they join? And what's the price of that choice? So here we are. The AI chip isn't the new oil. It's more like the new strait, a narrow passage that everyone needs to cross. The US designed that strait. They control the rules, the tolls, and increasingly, even the tracking of who passes through. China is building a bypass road. It's bumpy, it's under construction, and it doesn't go everywhere yet. But they're building it. And the rest of the world? They're watching both paths, trying to figure out which one leads somewhere worth going. So here's my question for you. If you were running a country, not a superpower, just a regular mid-sized country trying to compete, which side would you bet on? The American ecosystem with its proven track record but increasing restrictions? Or the Chinese ecosystem that's newer, less tested, but might offer more freedom from American rules? Tough choice, right? One more thing to think about. There's this meme floating around. AI OPEC. The idea that chip suppliers could act like an oil cartel? But here's the real question. Who's actually the cartel? Is it governments, companies like Nvidia, or the whole supply chain? Think about that. And drop a comment below telling me your take. I genuinely want to know what you think about all this. This stuff matters. Not in an abstract geopolitics is interesting way, but in a this will affect your life kind of way. The AI tools you use, the prices you pay, the jobs that exist, all of it connects back to this chip war. As always, today's story ends here. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you in the next one.